Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our sleep session this afternoon. It is a short lunch and learn session, so I will get started. If anyone else joins in the meantime, that's absolutely fine. We are recording this session today, so it just be the slides that are recorded. So if you don't want to be in the recording, just keep yourself on mute and use the chat function to ask any questions. And obviously, we won't read out names when we read out the questions, just for privacy. If you're not familiar with where the chat function is, you should have a speech bubble, a little bit like the one shown here. It might actually be round. You click that, you type your questions in a bit like a text message and press send. Justine, my colleague, is here just monitoring the chat for me, because actually when I've shared screen, I can only see the presentations. I can't see any of the chat function or who's there watching. And please do keep yourself on mute during the session unless you want to raise your hand and ask a question, just so that there's no background noise. You're welcome to eat your lunch during this session, have tea, coffee, etc. Feel free to nip to the bathroom if you do during the session, and feel free to take notes. So as I said, this is our sleep session today. It's actually Sleeptember, so Sleep Awareness Month. And we're just going to look at some tips of how we can sleep our way to better health. If you haven't done so already, it'd be lovely if you could just pop in the chat there your name and whereabouts you're from, and giving yourself a score on the scale of 1 to 10 as to how well you sleep. So 10 being fantastic, never have any issues, and 1 that you haven't slept well in a very long time. So what we're going to do in this session today is we're just going to have a look at some of the sleep guidelines, what the recommendations are. We'll have a discussion as to how sleep impacts our health and performance. We'll share some top tips for a better night's sleep, and there will be a resource that we can send out to you after the session, and we'll signpost you to some additional resources that should be of help to you as well. So it's quite a basic session. We're not going to go into any great detail on sleep disorders. There's so many out there, we could have a separate session on that. And I'm not a sleep expert, I'm a public health practitioner. I've done some training around sleep and around mental health. Okay. So it's really helpful when we start thinking about sleep to think about the stages of sleep. And a number of you might be aware of different stages of sleep, and this can help us understand what goes on during the night. So there are 2 distinct stages in our sleep: non-REM or rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sleep. And within the non-rapid eye movement sleep, there are 3 separate stages within that. And this cycle, we have a cycle in our sleep, each cycle. So we'll start with the non-rapid eye movement N1 there, which is about 5% of the cycle. That's where it will start as we drift off to sleep. And each cycle lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And we typically have sort of perhaps 4 to 5 cycles during the night. There. So what these stages of sleep are, they do different things. So the first one is that N1 sleep, and that's the lightest phase of sleep, just when we're drifting off. You might nod asleep in front of the TV, you can still hear the TV a little bit, you can be easily awoken up. That's quite a short stage. We then move from that into the N2 sleep, and this is the most substantial phase of sleep, but the one that specialists know the least about. During this session, we know that brain activity slows down and the body relaxes, and these stages get longer through the night. We then move into stage 3, and this is the deepest stage of sleep. It's closely linked with restorative sleep. This is where our bodies heal ourselves, where our mind clears itself, and where children will physically grow during the night. So if you've perhaps injured yourself as an adult, this is the stage where when you're asleep, your muscles will start to repair themselves. If you don't sleep very well, have a disturbed night, this is often the stage which gets disrupted the most, and it explains why you can have struggles concentrating the next day. These stages get shorter during the night. And then the 4th stage is that rapid eye movement sleep, and that's where dreams occur. Emotional memories are processed. So you might feel groggy if you get woken up during stage 3 sleep, and there are real consequences to waking up earlier or not getting enough sleep. So you might think, oh, do you know what? I've got to get up a couple of hours early tomorrow. That's no big deal. I'll just lose 25% of my sleep. But you're actually cutting down the most important parts of the sleep, that restorative cycle. So these stages get longer as you've been asleep, and if we cut down our sleep or don't get enough sleep, it's the restorative sleep that we're missing out on. This can impact our physical and our mental health. So we dream mostly during our rapid eye movement sleep. We all wake from time to time during the night, or get back into that N1, that lighter phase where it's easier to be woken up, and that's normal. And if we don't get enough sleep, our physical and mental health can suffer. So sleep guidelines, using the chat function there, would anyone like to type in a message to say how long they think we should be sleeping for? What do the guidelines tell us? Any suggestions? If you feel really brave, you're welcome to unmute yourself and say. Let's have a look at what the guidelines tell us. So anyone that's parents, we know that babies and small children need a lot more sleep, and as we get older, the amount of sleep we actually need does reduce. So for adults, we're talking about generally 7 to 9 hours a night. Some people can function on a little bit less than that. Some people need a bit more, but as an average, we say 7 to 9 hours a night. And older adults, age 65 and above, 7 to 8 hours. But how do we know if we're getting enough? So ask yourself, do you need a clock, an alarm clock to wake up in the morning? After waking up, could you easily fall back to sleep before 11 o'clock in the morning? And can you function well in the morning without caffeine? If you can't function well without caffeine, or you're falling asleep before 11 a.m, the chances are you've probably not had enough sleep, and certainly not had enough of that restorative sleep. So sleep is essential. It repairs the body and helps us consolidate our memories. The quality of sleep we get does vary as we age, particularly through things like the menopause. And sleep deprivation is defined as insufficient sleep or sleeplessness. It's okay to have 1 or 2 nights where we don't perhaps sleep very well, but over a long term that can really impact our health. So if we wake up tired, there is a chance that we're not getting enough sleep. So what controls our sleep? And this is really interesting. There's several factors here that control our sleep. And the first one is those biological or circadian rhythms. These were actually first discovered back in the 1930s by a professor who, along with his research assistant, decided to be his own guinea pig. Professor Kleitman, his name was, and his assistant, they put themselves into a cave with plenty of food. They spent 32 days in this cave with no detectable sunlight, observing their waking and sleeping times. They soon discovered that actually that didn't really change much over time, because that biological rhythm kept them going, and kept them getting to sleep and getting awake even without the influence of daylight. That biological rhythm is kind of almost set in us, and that can explain why we need to adjust when we change time zones and experience jet lag. Some people have different rhythms, preferring to sort of stay up late and get up late. Other people would be more like larks and want to wake up early in the morning, and some of us fall in the middle. The brain usually does use daylight to reset our body clock. Other signals are also used by the brain, including routine. So if you think about small children, we like to get them into a good bedtime routine, and actually as adults we're no different really. Our brains use any reliable and repeating pattern of external cues such as exercise, taking a warm bath at a regular time, food, and even social interaction. How many of us fall asleep watching the 10 o'clock news? So that can often be a cue. As we sit down in the evening after we've done all our jobs and bits and pieces, like walk the dog or done our bits and pieces, we can sit down, and that can be our bodies giving, oh, it's getting near bedtime now. Sometimes as the darkness comes in the evening, that can make us feel more sleepy. Our body clocks and brains learn those cues for sleep, and as adults we're no different from children really. A consistent routine around bedtime can help us to have those cues for sleep, help us to get a better night's sleep, and practice what we call sleep hygiene. There are also hormones which control our sleep, and there are 2 main hormones which control our sleep. The first one is melatonin, sometimes called the hormone of darkness. That's released at night time, and it tells our body it's nearly time to go to sleep. Those levels start to rise in the evening and usually peak in the early hours of the morning. The second hormone that comes into play is adenosine. This causes a pressure to sleep to build up in the brain, slowing down our wakeful areas and turning up those sleep-inducing regions. Well, if anyone has ever tried to sort of study late in the evening, it can be quite difficult. And perhaps if you're out driving or out and about, you can feel a bit sort of woozy if as that adenosine is building. Adenosine levels usually peak about 16 hours after we first wake up in the morning. So if you woke up at 7 a.m, those levels would start to peak at around 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. the adenosine levels clear from our brains when we've slept. And caffeine, that works by blocking those adenosine receptors, which is why when it wears off, we can quickly feel very sleepy all of a sudden. So these three things combined can help put us into a sleepy state. So signs of sleep deprivation. So using the chat function, if Justin, you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that and perhaps reading out anyone's suggestions, what kind of things do we think we might experience if we have sleep deprivation? What kind of things might we notice? Again, if you want to unmute, you're more than welcome to.
Getting agitated, not being able to form a sentence, yawning, visual disturbances.
That's great, thank you. I'll bring up the thing. Feel free to keep commenting, that's absolutely fine. But there's lots of different signs of sleep deprivation. So we had yawning was mentioned, got difficulty concentrating, making us irritable, an increased appetite, fatigue and clumsiness, and so on, as you can see on the graph here. So an occasional night's sleep, as I said, where you don't sleep very well, won't harm your health. You'll just be tired and grumpy the next day. But it's chronic sleep deprivation can really cause a problem. So things like fatigue, obviously, if we're very tired, it can make us more prone to risk of accidents. And that increased appetite can occur because a lack of sleep can impact our other hormones. We have two hormones that control our appetite. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone, which tells us we're hungry. If we haven't slept very well, the levels of that can increase, telling our body that we need more energy to keep going because we haven't slept very well. So we might be more hungry, and also crave more sort of comfort or stodgy or high energy foods. At the same time, the hormone called leptin, which tells us we're full, diminishes a little bit when we haven't slept very well. So we're not only increasing our appetite, but we don't necessarily know when we're full up. So we might be more prone to increased sickness. Our immune system drops off a bit. We might be forgetful and moody. So I'm sure there's some things that we all recognise when we've not had a very good night's sleep. If we think of sleep as our body's equivalent to a computer reboot, if we're continually not getting enough sleep or enough good quality sleep, then we're missing out of all that recovery and rejuvenation where our memory sorts itself, become more accident prone due to tiredness, difficulty concentrating. So it's really important where we can to try and protect our sleep time, give ourselves that good evening routine to feel rested and relaxed before we go to bed. And it's also good for our bodies, allowing our heart and our muscles to restore. So sleep and health, there's some real impact here on not sleeping very well. So life expectancy is 13% higher risk of mortality for adults who sleep regularly less than 6 hours a night. A lowered immune response, as we saw on the last slide. Sleep deprivation can make us more prone to illness. It can impair our cognitive functioning, reduces libido in both men and women. Signs of lower testosterone levels have been found in memory sleep apnea, and it decreases our reproductive hormones, so we might have difficulty conceiving. Lack of sleep can increase our risk of obesity. So adults who sleep for less than 7 hours a night or more than 9 hours are more likely to be obese, can have a higher risk of depression and anxiety where we sleep for less than 6 hours a night, and a risk of more risk of diabetes where we sleep for less than 5 hours a night. And as I said, that's also impacted with those hormones, that leptin and ghrelin being interrupted. The risk of heart disease increases with poor sleep, so blood pressure will go up, heart rate and other inflammatory markers, and also an increased risk of osteoporosis for those who are regularly sleeping for less than 6 hours a night. As we discussed already, our bodies rejuvenate and repair themselves at night. So if they're not repairing themselves properly, we have a risk of our bones not healing and repairing themselves properly, and that impacting with us osteoporosis later in life. And also there is some evidence there's an increased risk in the likelihood of developing dementia. So other things we might need to think about are other conditions that might affect our sleep. So insomnia, so 1 in 3 people can experience insomnia, and that's that chronic not being able to sleep sort of for a long period of time. Sleep will impact our mood with disorders, so including depression and anxiety. The menopause can impact our sleep, things like hot flushes, anxiety, joint pain and other menopausal symptoms, and then that can become an issue because then the lack of sleep stops people from recovering and being able to deal with those situations, and so it's a bit of a vicious cycle. Puts up more at risk of diabetes, musculoskeletal disorders and chronic pain, cardiovascular disease, asthma, affecting our thyroid, and so on. So there's lots of conditions that do affect our sleep. Those external factors that can impact our sleep include sort of sharing a bed. So if you have a snoring partner, pets, perhaps if you have a cat sleeping on the bed at night or a dog in the bedroom, that might disturb you. Our bed and environment. So recommendations are to change our mattress every 8 to 10 years and keep a cool bedroom with cool covers. Perhaps noise pollution if you live in a busy built up area, or if you're a shift worker trying to sleep during the day. Children, especially young children who might wake in the night, and stress. So there are lots of things that can impact our sleep. So it's really important where we can to have a think about where we can reduce those risks and eliminate those where possible. So sleep and mental health, as we said, lack of sleep can lead to poor mental health, but poor mental health can also lead to a lack of sleep, as this diagram here from the Mental Health Foundation shows us. So we might have a lack of sleep, which leads to tiredness, that leads to difficulty coping with daily life, that impacts our self-esteem, and those feelings of worry and stress can then lead to lack of sleep. So if you find yourself in this situation, it's really important to seek help with your mental health, try and get those things addressed and do what you can to protect your sleep so that you don't end up in this vicious cycle. You might have might find a sleep problem can lead you to lots of negative thoughts, feeling depressed and anxious, feeling lonely or isolated. So it's just to raise awareness really and get you to sort of seek help if these things do apply to you. And as I said, try not to suffer with your sleep and sacrifice it, because it will impact your mental health in the long run. So during menopause, which I mentioned, 12% of women usually experience sleep complaints, but during the menopause it goes up to about 40%. As I said, again, caused by things like hot flushes, insomnia, and other perimenopause symptoms can lead to more difficulty sleeping. Sort of fluctuating levels of estrogen and progesterone, increased anxiety, stress and worries. So some treatments will help it to alleviate that. And again, if this is something that applies to you or anyone you know, we'd definitely consider having things like cognitive behaviour therapy, increasing phytoestrogens in your diet by including things like soy milk, tofu, nuts and seeds, or just seeking some help from a health professional if it's really impacting you with your sleep. So sleep and performance, these figures don't make great reading, and we'll get onto some more fun, more light-hearted bits in a moment. But 1 in 3 people, as I said, are affected by insomnia. And if we haven't slept for 18 hours, that's a number of hours where our reaction times become similar to the drink driving limit. So if you have been awake maybe since 7 a.m, by 1 o'clock the following morning, your reaction times when driving will be similar to the drink driving limit, which then really puts it into sort of stark contrast. And you think actually that's probably not uncommon, maybe on a Friday evening, to have been to work that day, gone out for dinner or something in the evening, or to see a show. So do bear in mind, if you haven't slept very well, perhaps consider using a taxi or public transport. And as it shows here, you're 4.3 times more likely to be involved in a car accident when driving if you've had less than 5 hours sleep. So it's really important to look after ourselves, not to drive if we don't feel it's safe to do so. And 200,000 days are lost in the UK every year due to insufficient sleep. And people that put 5 to 6 hours in the week for sleep and slept longer at the weekends do reduce their risk of early death, but unfortunately the stats show that it didn't reduce their risk of diabetes and heart disease. So it's important to try and sleep consistently where we can. So now we've done all the doom and gloom about how sleep impacts our health, how if we don't sleep properly it's not good for us, and what the impact of our performance can be. Let's have a look at some general sleep tips. So has anyone got any suggestions, things they do to help themselves sleep better, things that they have found that work for them? Justin, if again you wouldn't mind reading out from the chat, please.
Herbal teas.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so like cutting down on caffeine, that's really good.
No other suggestions at the moment. Oh, one more. Some good pillows, and the window being open.
Oh yeah, so nice comfy bed, good supportive pillows, and having the window open at the right temperature in the room, that's a good idea.
And lower lights.
Yeah, nice.
Listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
And looking at having diagnosis of sleep apnea if needed.
Yeah, so if you notice a problem in yourself or in your partner, if it's your partner that's disturbing you, do get those things looked at with medication and treatment and things that can be helped. Let's have a look at the list here. So having a routine, so sticking to a regular pattern that works for you. So keeping regular hours, especially between working and non-working days, can be really helpful in getting good sleep. Exercising regularly. So moderate exercise is one of the most effective non-pharmaceutical or non-medical drugs for disturbed sleep. So avoid rigorous exercise 3 hours before bed. I'm sure if anyone went out for a run or a big gym session at sort of 8 or 9 p.m, they'd probably come home buzzing and wouldn't be able to sleep. Something gentle in the evening, some gentle stretches can help. If you do some exercise during the day, that can release those hormones, regulate your hormones to help you sleep better in the evening. Getting some daylight. So evidence shows that getting outside, particularly in the morning, can reset our body clock, make us more alert during the day, and therefore encouraging better sleep at night. So any of you that do work from home regularly, especially as we get into sort of the darker months, do try and get out during the daytime, perhaps at lunchtime or just after work before it gets dark, to try and get a bit of daylight. Creating that better environment. So people said about their pillows and opening their room. So our bedroom should be between 18 and 24 degrees centigrade, a nice dark quiet space. So do check the age of your mattress and pillows. Recommendations are to change mattresses every 8 to 10 years. Pillows, you can make sure you wash them and keep them clean regularly, and do change them when they need changing. Wear light pyjamas if your room's warm, and try to use bedding from natural fibres to reduce that sort of sweatiness. If you can't sleep, get up and do something relaxing outside of bed, but do avoid watching TV, using phones and iPads. Have to go and sit in another room where it's still quite dark. Try reading for a little while, try some breathing exercises to relax. Cut down on caffeine. Yeah, so those herbal teas can be really helpful, particularly in the evening. So caffeine can take up to 6 hours to wear off, and several hours after drinking it, you'll still have half the caffeine in your system. So if you had a cup of coffee maybe at 2 or 3 p.m, at 9 p.m, you still got a large amount of caffeine in your system, and that will get topped up if you then had an additional drink when you got home from work. So just have a think about that. Everyone metabolizes it at a slightly different rate. Some people find they've got a very low tolerance, other people not so much. But if you are having trouble sleeping, do try cutting down on your caffeine first of all. Some other tips, so food and alcohol. So too much of either of these close to bedtime can disturb our sleep. Alcohol might initially make us feel sleepy, but if we think back to the sleep cycle at the start of the session, it will actually reduce the amount of time we're in that restorative cycle for. So we won't get such a deep, good quality sleep if we've been drinking too much alcohol. Nicotine, so smokers find that they take longer to fall asleep, they wake up more frequently, have more sleep disruptions. Obviously the best advice would be to give up smoking, and our smoking service would be happy to support you if that's something you're looking to do, or perhaps try to use something like a nicotine patch, which will give you a slow release of nicotine through the night, and avoid your sleep being disturbed. It says here as well to try e-cigarettes. Reducing screen time, so phones obviously emit light from their screen, and the best recommendation is to try and have 1 to 2 hours of screen free time before bed. If you do find that difficult, a lot of newer devices do have a light reduction filter on that you can use, so you can reduce the light that's coming from the screen. Write it down. If you sit there lying in bed worrying about things, perhaps jot them down on a notepad. Keep your worries for another day. And if you do consistently have poor sleep, try and keep a sleep diary to see if you can notice any patterns. And again, allowing time to wind down, which is really critical to sleep preparation. Things like having a bath, listening to quiet music, stretching, meditation, and so on can all give our brains those cues that it's time for sleep and help us to relax. So I don't know if there's any shift workers on the call, or if you know any shift workers, but these tips can be really helpful if you are doing shift work, or even if you've got perhaps an early flight for a holiday or a late night coming up. So unfortunately, we can't really bank sleep as such, but what we can do is rest well in advance. So if we know we're going to have a late night, or we've got to get up early for a flight to go on a lovely holiday, we can make sure we're well rested beforehand, so that we, if we do need to get up early, it doesn't impact us as much. Maintaining a good sleep routine. Exercising in the morning can encourage napping in the early afternoon, and make sure you're well fed and hydrated. If you do night shifts, resist the temptation to have high sugar and high fat food during the night. if you can, have a short 20-minute nap and use caffeine carefully. Try to stick with it mostly in the earlier part of your shift, again, so that it's worn off by the time you've finished. So when you do go home and go to bed, you can sleep well. And do maximise your light exposure, aiming to take walks to increase alertness during the day. Have a light snack about 30 minutes before you do go to sleep after your night shift. Avoid using electronics, perhaps keep your phone in a different room. And then try to get back to normal patterns after your shift work as soon as possible. So just in wrap up really, so as we've seen, sleep can impact both our physical and mental health. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. It's really important to recognise the signs of sleep deprivation, speak to your GP if poor sleep is something that impacts your health. And there are a range of health habits that we can support to change that. So if there's any one thing that you can do to change, do feel free to add that to the chat. If you think, actually, I'm going to give that a try, that'd be lovely to hear from you. Or equally, if you've tried something in the past that really worked for you, then please do share that. Other people may want to try that as well. After the session today, we'll be sending out some resources here. So it's our top 10 tips for good sleep, sort of taken from the slides here. And these have all come from research that you can follow. So it'd be a little takeaway for you to just remind yourself of protecting your sleep time and looking at how you can improve that. And there's some good resources out there online as well. So you can take an NHS sleep assessment quiz, giving yourself a sleep score and tips. And the NHS Every Mind Matters webpage, it's full of mental health advice and sleep information. So do have a look at that. As I said at the beginning, it is September, so it's the Sleep Charities National Sleep Awareness Month. They do have a free confidential phone line with the details on their website. So if you are struggling, you can speak to a trained advisor and get some general support there in the evenings. And again, they've got lots of information on their website. There's lots of meditation apps out there, including the NHS bedtime meditation app, Headspace and Calm. So if those sort of things work for you, perhaps give those a try. And there's lots of sleep information by topic. So sleep in the menopause, sleep apnea and insomnia, and specific shift work guides here from the Health and Safety Executive. If you do need more support in this area, do check out your staff counselling service or your employer, or if they have an employee assistance provider. There's lots of help out there. So if you are struggling, do seek that. And if you can't find anything else, perhaps speak to your chemist, pharmacist, or keep a diary and just have a chat with your GP about any struggles that you're having. That's it for this session. We have left a bit of time at the end now for any questions that anyone's got. If you could scan the QR code there for us and complete the feedback survey. We really value your feedback from these sessions. It helps us to shape them, maybe give them in a bit more detail or the length of time and etc. So we can improve those in future. I'll stop sharing after you've had a chance to scan the QR code, and any questions would be welcome if you have any.
No questions at the moment, just asking if we have any information, if we can send it on.
Yeah, we'll send out a copy of the slides and we'll send out those top tip sheets as well. In the slide, you'll have the links that you can then follow. Thank you so much for attending, everyone, this afternoon. Hope you found it useful. Thank you for filling in the feedback. I'll stop the recording now. Anyone's free to ask questions if they wish to.